If you're a corporate professional trying to stay on top of work, workouts, relationships, and replying to 73 unread messages, it's no wonder you might feel overwhelmed. And it's probably because you're not applying optimal prioritization strategies to your personal life, even though you probably use some of them already at work. See, as your time gets constrained, and we find this as we go through adulthood, getting clear on your actual priorities is absolutely essential to make sure that you're making time for what matters most. And today I'm going to cover 3 techniques to help you figure out what to prioritize and, crucially, what to deprioritize. Because as Steve Jobs said, deciding what not to do is just as important as deciding what to do. So let's get into it. The good news is the first simple tool to help you get more done all while doing less, you probably already use at work. And it's the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, which states that 80% of the outputs come from 20% of the inputs. In 1906, Vilfredo Pareto noticed that 20% of his pea pods were producing 80% of his peas. Bit of a horticulturalist. But then he started looking for this pattern elsewhere, and he noticed 20% of Italians owned 80% of land. And then he started looking and realized that this pattern shows up everywhere, in business, personal lives. In business, the top 20% of customers pretty much always bring in 80% of the revenue. In tech, 20% of bugs cause 80% of software issues. So now the task is, how can you apply this to your life to help you prioritize? For tasks, ask yourself what 20% of tasks are going to bring 80% of your desired outcomes and results. And apply it more broadly. What 20% of people and activities bring 80% of your happiness and 80% of your stress and problems? So to apply this first technique, look at the people, activities, and tasks in your week and ask yourself, what are the 20% that are going to lead to 80% of the results? This is what I mean when I talk about pulling the big levers. And the Pareto analysis is fantastic for identifying these big levers to pull, but you might want to go one step further and actually get to an action plan of the steps to take. And one of my clients found this second prioritization exercise so useful that he's implemented it with the team he manages at work. I call it the time prioritization pyramid. And all you do is ask yourself 3 simple questions with increasingly tight time constraints. First, if you had a whole week to work purely on the task at hand, so an outrageously large period of time, what is everything you do to achieve your desired results? Write everything out. And the second question you'd ask is, say, okay, what if you only had one evening, a few hours, to get as close to that point as possible? What would you do? And suddenly, you naturally start filtering things out. And third, if you only had 10 minutes right now to get as close as you could to your desired outcome, what would you do? And this helps identify that number one thing, potentially the one you're avoiding, which is actually gonna make the biggest difference. And that is where you start. See, normally when you write out that long list, you're looking at things like researching, iterating, perfecting, but you can cut all that out and go straight to the big levers to make the biggest impact. But if you're still struggling to prioritize in the present, what can help is going into the future and working backwards, using an NLP or neuro-linguistic programming technique known as future pacing. All you need to do is imagine yourself having already achieved the goal, the result you're working towards in the future, and then looking backwards. Now, often people use this as a visualization technique to build belief and confidence and momentum to something they're striving to achieve. And I like to go one step further and use it as a way to reverse engineer the key steps to get to that goal. So all you have to do is ask yourself one simple question. For whatever time period you're thinking of, what would I like to have achieved by the end of it? So if you're trying to plan your day, what would I love to have achieved by the end of this day? Just one thing. If it's your week, if it's your month, if it's your quarter, if it's your year, zoom out. And what that does is it takes you out of your current present-based mindset where there might be some fears, limiting beliefs, a bit of laziness maybe holding you back, and says, what would I like to have achieved? And that's how you get honest with yourself. It works if you zoom out across your whole life, which is why you might have heard of exercises like writing your own obituary and saying, okay, by the end of my life, or maybe by my 80th birthday, what would I love to have achieved looking back? But you can also use it on a smaller time scale. I use it every day and every week, thinking about, okay, by the end of this day, by the end of this week, what is the 1 or 2 things I would love to have achieved? Once you've got these key priorities, you're most of the way there. The next thing is just about scheduling these in and holding yourself accountable, which I'll cover in future videos. In the corporate world, there is no shortage of techniques used to help companies maximize their profit and revenue. So why wouldn't we apply these to our personal lives? In a time when to-do lists feel endless and expectations are almost rising exponentially, it's important to prioritize what really matters most. And these 3 techniques will help you gain clarity of what you really want to achieve and what you really want to prioritize. But the one bonus, final aspect that most people overlook is their mindset. So a simple mindset technique And a little shift that genuinely changed my life and helped so many of my clients that you can apply to support these 3 techniques is to stop saying you don't have time for something and start saying, I'm not prioritizing it. So to repeat, completely stop saying I don't have time for something and just start saying I'm not prioritizing it. For some things, you'll be fine and you'll say, yeah, you know what, I'm not prioritizing that. But for other things, it won't really sit right. And that tells you your actions are not aligned with your priorities. After all, you're always doing something. Whether you're at work, whether you're sat on the sofa doom scrolling, whether you're exercising, whether you're journaling, planning your week, whatever. And the crucial thing is just to make sure you're actually prioritizing your time as you want. Because how we spend our days is ultimately how we spend our lives. And to leave you with the words of Henry David Thoreau, it's not enough to be busy, so are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about? Enjoy. Hopefully you found that useful. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out, and otherwise, let me know how you get on. I'll see you in a future video. Cheers.